So I do appreciate that. My name is Barry Schomover. I'm a senior program manager on the System Center cross-platform and interop team. Some of you have seen me speak before. For those of you that have not, I'm going to give you a really easy way to remember my name. If you cross the L and make it a T, you'll never forget the name. And my initials are BS, so you can imagine really easy childhood growing up. Before I get started, I kind of wanted to ask you guys a couple of questions. How many of you have installed and have used cross-platform extensions? Good. So for a lot of you, it's going to be fairly new. How many of you manage just your Windows environment? How about just your Linux environment, Unix environment? Both? Okay, good. Good. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to give you kind of a high-level overview of the product and how we're doing it. Give you some news. We know about the products. We know the kind of problems that you guys are running into, the kind of solutions you're looking for. We'll look at the architecture. We'll explain how we did it and why we did it the way we did. We think it's actually critical to the solution to understand the way that it's built. We'll look at some of the partner extensions real quick. Within that, I'll also look at some of the new features that we've announced and have released. And then demos. So really what I want to do is I want to get through the first three in about 20, 25 minutes. And I'd rather spend the rest of the session in the product. Just give you a feel for it so we can kick the tires a bit. So we're well aware, right, of the issues that you guys have. And we've been listening to them. One of the concerns that we've had from customers is, great, Microsoft is building Unix and Linux monitoring solutions. What in the world does Microsoft know about Unix and Linux? Right? We've also heard there's no way you're installing a Microsoft agent on my system. There's no way the Dark Empire is putting anything on my Unix box. I mean, we've heard all of it. So it's important to why we've gone the open source route, and I'll go through that fairly deep. And we promised when we announced this, we announced it about a year and a half ago, 18 months ago, or 20 months ago. And we promised that we're going to take all the components that sit on the Unix or Linux side, and we're going to open source it. We announced when we announced the program that we were part of the open group. We are on the steering committee. We are committed to do open source. Since then, we've open sourced our providers. So our agent is made up of two parts, the actual OpenPegasus components and the providers that we've written for that. The first phase of that is to release the providers. Those are available on CodePlex. There's actually a link in the slide that you can actually go to it. And by the way, these slides you can download them through they're not there yet? Okay. After the session, I'll make sure that they're uploaded. Okay. So we've open sourced our providers. We're also committed to not just releasing this solution and then kind of stepping back and going, we've got Unix and Linux, we're not going to move forward. We're continuously moving forward. We've added SLES 11. SLES 11 from Novell was released about the same time we RTM'd. We committed to release it within 180 days, and we did release it. The nice thing about the way that we released it, and I'll talk about this when we talk about the Discovery Wizard, is we did not have to wait for a new version of Operations Manager. We simply gave you a new agent and a new management pack. That's all you need. Okay? You don't have to wait for new binaries to come out. We've also heard from a lot of our Solaris customers that Solaris Zones was critical. They use a lot of zones. It's a virtualization type technology, and they had to have it. We added that support as well. Today, this week, we're announcing a private beta of our audit collection services. So Operations Manager 2007 R2 has audit collection services. In R2, we actually shipped some components to allow us to do the Unix and Linux, and I'll talk about that. So you'll be able to do audit collection across your complete environment. Coming soon, we're completing our contribution to OpenPegasus. We've got final legal sign-off, final executive sign-off. We'll be taking our changes, sending it back to the open group. And the next version of OpenPegasus, 2.10, will have all the components all the changes we made to the provider. That means that partners and customers can take that code from CodePlex for our providers, OpenPegasus, recompile that on a system, and have an agent that is compatible with our platform. Okay. So that's some high-level stuff, and I'll drill a little bit deeper into some of those. Looking at the architecture, we wanted to come up with a way that we could answer that question, or put the issue aside where Unix and Linux administrators didn't want Microsoft code on the system. So we went down that open source route. And we didn't want to install an agent per se. So this is different than the way we do it on Windows, where we have an agent that you deploy and install. We actually deploy and install components for the operating system rather than an operations manager agent. Okay. For those of you who use Windows, you're probably familiar with WMI. WMI is a SIMOM that allows you to instrument things like disks and network adapters, applications, and anything like that. And it's a standard way for you to get that. You can use tools to query and enumerate information from WMI, to execute tasks on WMI. This is really what we're doing here. We're just adding a SIMOM. That's that bottom orange box. To communicate off the box, we're using a protocol called WS Management. WS Management is an industry standard protocol designed specifically for management that's SOAP and XML based. So looking at how things flow. Up at the top, we've got the health service. That's the operations manager health service. No difference there. There's a WS Management module that shipped with 2007 that allows us to actually use Windows Remote Management, which is the WS Management implementation that's built into every version of Windows from 2003 on, as well as XP. We use that WinRM channel, the WS Management channel, to do things like get instances, enumerate a group of instances, invoke actions. We've also written two new modules. Those are the two blue boxes, an SFTP and an SSH. And to do that, we actually ship the PuTTY open source libraries in the product. Really what we've done is we've taught Operations Manager how to SFTP and SSH. And for that, we execute commands, we'll run session tasks, and we'll deploy our bits as well. On the Unix Linux box, we add two components. It's one installer, but it's really two components. OpenPegasus 2.9, WS Management is built into it, and our providers. Everything else is standard. On the Unix and Linux side, we build binaries. So if you actually go to the Operations Manager server and you look under Agent Management, you'll see a Unix folder. Within that are all the binary management agents that we ship. So you don't have to compile anything. We'll give you an RPM for Linux. We'll give you a PKG file for Solaris, LLP for AIX, etc. You can install it manually. You can install it using deployment tools that you may have in your environment. Or you can use Operations Manager to push those agents out. Those contain all the binaries for SIMOM, for OpenPegasus, and for WS Management. I'll install the daemons and all the providers. On the Windows side, it's built into Operations Manager 2007 R2. This is one of the most important things that we wanted to achieve with R2. We wanted to make sure that the experience was that single pane of glass for Windows, Unix, and Linux. We didn't want it to feel like a bolt-on solution. We didn't want it to feel like a partner solution that kind of was separate to it. We want it fully integrated, and we achieved that. So when you install R2, you get all the components that you need to monitor the 17 platforms that shipped with R2. All the agents, all the management packs, all the binaries, all the modules are already configured. We extend the UI in several different places, views, new wizard. We've added modules, SSH, SFTP, a module for signing certificates, because that's something that we rely on, and all the management packs. Now, when we shipped R2, we had 17 different platforms. We've added two more. That's SLES 11, x86, and x64. Again, I'll talk about how we can deliver these without actually requiring you to install new versions of Operations Manager or update Operations Manager. Now, I wanted to spend a few minutes kind of explaining the management pack hierarchy. Up at the top, it's actually very similar to Windows. Up at the top, we have our main library, and that is the Microsoft.unix.library. And I know that in my lifetime, I never thought I'd see that, the Microsoft.unix. And if you actually look at the computer object, it's called Microsoft.unix.computer. So within this library, this is, like I said, this is kind of the main hub of cross-plat. It defines the objects, what a Unix computer is, what a logical disk, physical disk, processor is, what an application component might look like, with all the properties associated with it. Group relationships, hosting relationships. We also have data sources, probe actions, and write actions. Data sources will go out there and give you information back. Probe actions will read stuff into it. Write actions will write stuff back and execute commands. We have generic monitors and generic tasks. These are generic only in that they apply to all Unix computers, all Linux computers. They are not OS dependent. So things like, is a certificate healthy? That has nothing to do with whether it's a Unix or a Linux box. It has to do with the agent. We also have a couple of extra MPs on there that add some of the templates and some of the views and images and stuff. Below that, we go into a Linux. Now we're kind of going, there's two different directions we can go. We can go into the Unix area and then the Linux area. And the reason I'm going to the Linux area is there's one extra level here. Okay? The Linux defines Linux-specific stuff if it's different than Unix. So if a computer has a different property that is Linux only, it would be defined here. Now we move into the class of the Linux system, SUSE. This defines the SUSE objects. If we're looking at Unix, that second box wouldn't be there. If we look at Solaris, for example, we'd have Microsoft.solaris.library. Okay, so that's that extra level. And below that, we have the actual management pack, Microsoft.linux.sles.10. We also have 9, and we also have 11 under that. This now defines SLES 11 specific objects if they're different from SUSE, Linux, or Unix. And this is where the meat and potato is. This is where all of the knowledge that we have, the monitors, the diagnostics, the recoveries, the discoveries, the reports, everything sits within those management packs. Those are the key ones. When you install the product, the only ones you'll get is you'll get that top library. Nothing else is installed, except for those other ones that I said, the views. But below that, nothing else is installed. The reason we do that is we don't want to assume that you have Solaris in your environment. We don't want Solaris views to appear in your views if you don't monitor Solaris. As soon as you import your Solaris management packs, those Solaris views will appear. Those monitors will exist. And you will be able to discover Solaris systems. Now what I've done here is I'm not going to go through these. These are the actual management packs that sit at those levels. These are the ones that are installed and imported automatically when you install R2. They're just here for your information so that you can, if you want to go back and look for those management packs, that's where they are.
Can I customize them?
I'm sorry?
Can I customize them?
Can you customize the management packs? These ones you cannot modify, but you can override them. So there's a lot of things you can override. And everything that we do, there's nothing secret that we do. You can take a look at how we've done our management packs. We'll be glad to help you customize them. And I'll talk about how we've helped customers in the past to do that. We don't do anything special, so you can extend it in the same way that you would any other management pack. So, cross-platform audit collection services. How many people here have used audit collection services on the Windows side? How many people know about audit collection services? A few. Okay. So I'll talk a little bit about it. So really what audit collection services are, let me back up here. What audit collection services are, let's forget about Crossplat for 1 second. It's a functionality in Operations Manager 2007 that allows you to pull the events out of the security log of the systems that are being monitored in near real time into a central repository. And from that central repository, you can run reports to get audit information about your environment. A lot of companies have audit requirements. Some countries in the EU are starting to now mandate that you have to do it. I know that Italy is looking at implementing that December 15th. So you have to audit if you're kind of a public sector or you collect customer information or custom credit card. So you can prove that the right people have access, that you don't have people that aren't authorized making changes to your environment. So that's really what it does on the Windows side. It just pulls those events out of Windows, stores them in the database, allows you to run audit reports on it. Customers have been asking for that for Unix and Linux. If I'm going to use Operations Manager to monitor my complete environment, I can't just do it on Windows. I need to be able to do it on Unix and Linux. So we opened a private beta and I'll talk a little bit about it. Really what it does is it leverages that same infrastructure. So there's, again, no new changes to R2 to enable the Unix Linux monitoring. If you actually look at the R2 installation, if you have it in place, and look at the ACS schema, you'll see that the Unix and Linux schema is already in there. We did that when we shipped R2 knowing full well that we were going to release this. We collect events out of the Unix and Linux logs, whether that's syslog or other log files. And we give you out-of-the-box events. So we'll collect on Linux, for example, right now there's 19 different messages that we collect. It's extensible by you, and it's extensible by partners. So we're working with partners to extend that. Reporting, I'll list all the reports with things like access violations, account management, etc. We provide the infrastructure for enterprise monitoring for our partners and for our customers. So we're working with customers such as Bridgeway, such as Secure Vantage, to go to the application space as well. So you have Oracle on Linux or Unix. You can monitor and audit that information as well as network devices. So partners are looking at extending it to be able to collect audit events from Cisco devices, for example, and pull those into Operations Manager as well. Delivery, this is going to be out of band, meaning that we don't have to wait for the next version of Ops Manager. There's a private beta right now. RTM, we're targeting first quarter of next year. So it's only a few months away. Reports, there's the 7 reports. I'll go into them in a little bit more detail. We ship the management packs, so all this, the different data sources you might require to consume SU and syslog and audit events are built in, so you don't have to rebuild them. You can just leverage them. So for you guys, if you want to monitor a new event that we don't monitor, you simply write a management pack. You can take our rule and copy it and just target. All you do is you pass into it. Really, you pass 3 things into it. You pass the name of the log file, the expression you want to match, and then you have to pass another one into our module to know how to read that message and how to write that message to the system event log. Platforms, Linux is supported in the beta. Unix is coming at RTM. We will support all 19 platforms when we release the RTM. Now, how does it all work? So if we take a look on the right here, we have the log file provider. This is part of the Ops Manager cross-platform agent. You don't have to install a new agent when you install cross-platform ACS. There's nothing new on the agent. So on a regular basis, what the agent does is it pulls syslog or any other log file, and it looks for filters, for pattern matches. If it matches those patterns, it caches it. And at a regular interval, the management packs trigger rules to go out and get these or look for these particular messages. And we have rules now that will say, okay, somebody tried to break into my system. Actually, I think I have one here I can show you. So you can see up at the top here, I had an SSH authentication failure detected. That's one that's built into R2. It's not part of ACS. So we do collect some of these events already. On a regular basis, every time there's a new rule, we pass that filter down to the log file provider on the right there, and it caches it, and then it now looks for that log file and that filter. As I said, on a regular basis, the management pack triggers a rule to go and collect the syslog event. That goes to a module that we have, a log file module that we have as part of R2. That connects to our agent, pulls that information back. If that matches the filter, the management pack will then write it to a new module that we drop on the box. That module will parse it, drop it into the Windows security log on the Operations Manager server that is monitoring that Unix box or Linux box. At that point, ACS simply picks it up and writes into the ACS database. Once we write into that red database, the security event log, from that point, it's just pure ACS. It is not specific to cross-platform. So the scenarios that we support out of the box, SU success fail, sudo success fail, login, SSH, SFTP, FTP, and console, as well as group actions, changing passwords, adding, removing users, groups, users from groups. We have several reports, access violations, somebody's trying to log in unsuccessfully, account management, somebody added a user. The forensic at the bottom gives me all the events for a specific user. You know, Barry's doing some funny things on the network. I want to see everything that he's doing. So I can create a report on that. For a specific computer, there's something funny going on with that system. I want to see it. So that's a really high level of the ACS. I'll show you that from start to finish, give you an idea of what it looks like. From a partner extension standpoint, there's two big partners that we're working with right now. Bridges is one. They're actually downstairs in the exhibit hall. Currently, they have Apache, MySQL, Oracle, VMware, JBoss, and Tomcat. What's also important here is that wherever possible, their management packs will run on both Windows and Unix and Linux. So Oracle, Apache, MySQL, for example, those exist on Windows as well as Linux. So a single vendor to collect that information. In a week or so, they're releasing DB2, Blackboard Enterprise Server. Beta will be IBM WebSphere, WebLogic from Oracle, and then early next year, they're going to release RAC as well as JMX. And this will give you an idea of kind of where they're going. So they're looking at other things like PostgreSQL and Postfix, SendMail. Another partner that's downstairs is Novell. What Novell has done is they've extended, they've gone in a different direction. Instead of going in the application, they've gone lower into the OS. So if you look at Windows, for example, we released the Windows Management Pack, then released Windows Active Directory and Windows DNS and Windows DHCP. Same idea, right? So they monitor bind DNS, DHCP server, Samba for file shares, NFS server, LDAP, so Kerberos server, print servers, firewall. They've also got another feature that I don't have listed here that will connect into their network, their data network, that has all the knowledge about SLES. They run a little tool on the system, which kind of takes a snapshot of the configuration, and they will generate alerts and events to tell you if there's updates available or if there's a security vulnerability or you have something configured incorrectly. Now, one of the biggest questions we get is, what about Red Hat? So please go downstairs and ask them for Red Hat. From a technical perspective, they've got it going, and they're going to release it on the web. Okay? But they need the customer saying, we want Red Hat. It's important to us. Okay, so that's kind of the high level of the product. Before I get into demos, are there any questions about kind of the architecture or ACS or anything like that? Yes? That's a good question. Right. So the question is, why do we put it in the Windows security log rather than just directly into ACS? Two reasons. One, by putting in the ACS or in the syslog, it leverages the real-time capability of audit collections, right? And there's also guaranteed delivery of those events, which is something that we would not be able to do if we wrote directly to the database. Also, the database itself has very specific schema that if we wrote directly to that database, we'd have to really reinvent ACS. Right? We'd have to rewrite the collector, which didn't make a lot of sense. There'd be new components you'd have to install, new security models you'd have to work with. Okay. Question over here?
Yes, I was going to ask, obviously you would support 19 versions of
Yep.
what happens like CentOS?
CentOS.
Are there options for people?
So great idea. Oh, great question. So the question is, we support 19 platforms. What about the ones that we don't, like CentOS and whatnot? So we do look at the other platforms, and as we get customers saying, you know what, we've deployed your solution, but we have these other systems that we need, and we need to have those, we will revisit that as to whether we do CentOS, for example. Now, CentOS, Fedora are just Red Hat derivatives, right? They do. And so there's a difference between working and supported by Microsoft. Okay? So for us to support it, we have to release those management packs and those agents. And that's a test cost. So that's something that we, as I said, we look at on a case-by-case basis, and we will add platforms. It's just a question. It's not a question of if; it's a question of when. Okay, and we need the customer feedback for that. However, from Red Hat and from the CentOS, for example, if you want to just test it, make sure it works, you can either modify our management packs. And this, when we announced it at MMS, not last year but the year before, it took less than 2 days for one of our MVPs to build CentOS MPs. Okay, I will tell you that our Red Hat agent, I know this is on record, but our agent will install on CentOS, the Red Hat agent. We will not push it to it. You'd have to manually install it, nor would we support it. So if you phone CSS, they won't give you support on that. Yeah.
Elaborate on one more example. You mentioned Ubuntu.
So Ubuntu, yeah.
In the 19?
So Debian is not in the 19. And Ubuntu is not in the 19. But that's a big reason why we've gone down the open source route as well. We can't support all the platforms. It's just not possible for us to do that. It's not just the cost for testing. It's also, if you can imagine, CSS requires servers to work with. So when you call them and say, I have an issue, they want to be able to fix that problem. Right? If you look at the cost of HPUX and AIX and some of those, they're really expensive. So just building that environment is not possible. So we're working with partners, customers that have their own version of Linux. Like we have customers that have modified kind of their version of Linux. They can take those open source providers, and once we finish the open sourcing of the Pegasus components, they will take it and build it on Ubuntu. From a management pack perspective, there's nothing secret in the management pack. So if you know how to actually view our management packs, even though they're sealed, you can just grab them and modify them. And we don't have a problem helping you with that. Point you in the right direction if you get stuck, because we want that. We want the field. We want customers. We want partners to say, I got it running on Ubuntu, because that's great. It just proves our platform. Okay. You had a question? Yeah, absolutely. So it's like, are there other monitoring solutions or scenarios like this space and whatnot? I'll actually show you that. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Support for Cisco network appliances?
So for Cisco network and stuff, do we have support for Cisco network and appliances? We don't out of the box unless you look at some basic SNMP traps. So we don't have agents to do that. There are some partner solutions that will do that today. And in the future, in the next version, we're adding network support. So we will be able to discover those devices.
Now, do you have any kind of integration with any network monitoring to Cisco?
Do we have any integrations with other networking monitoring solutions? We don't that I'm aware of. There are some partners that do kind of the generic ones. I'm not sure if the universal will work. Will the universal work? EMC, true. EMC Smarts does have one, and that's the information that we licensed. We licensed that technology from them, and that's what's going into the next product. For the short term, if you have EMC Smarts, you can have a connector that talks to it. Okay. Let me kind of switch over. So I'll spend the rest of the session, 45 minutes, just going through the product and show you that. Actually, let me kind of show you the high-level stuff that I'll be talking about. So I'll talk about Discovery Wizard, management pack templates, monitoring applications, some of the collection services. And because there's a lot of people that haven't seen this before, I'll actually go a little bit deeper into the product itself to actually show you the kind of stuff that we can collect. So what you're looking at here is just R2, the same one you can download, with the ACS beta. There's nothing else different to it. So this is nothing special. Okay? So I talked about this being really, really important for us to be integrated into the product. We wanted that single pane of glass. So if I look in a couple of spots, you'll actually notice I've got Unix and Linux servers, and I can monitor a server here. Down here, I've got another view that shows me some more information about that system. Okay. If I install the Solaris MPs, a Solaris node will appear under here, and I'll be able to monitor my Solaris systems. Now, you asked about going a little bit deeper. So if I actually drill into this system, you can see that there's a lot of things that I'm monitoring here. I've got some custom daemons that I'm monitoring. Right? I've got some hardware information. There's my network adapter, my logical disk. I can also look at processors and physical disks, but that's disabled by default. But I can monitor those as well. Specific daemons. ACPI, cron, syslog, SSH. The reason we only have 6 or 7 here is we didn't want this lighting up like a big Christmas tree with green and red lights. So what we picked is we picked daemons that we were pretty confident would exist in every Linux environment of SLES type that we would find. And we gave you the capability, and I'll show you this, to add new daemons and monitor daemons that are your own or third-party applications or just built on the system. Now, the way that we did a lot of this, you'll notice that not only are we monitoring it, but we actually have knowledge. So when I look at things like logical disk, I have knowledge about what it means to be unhealthy and how to resolve it. And how do we get that knowledge? Well, a lot of people on the team come from a Unix and Linux background, myself included. We also hired a couple of Linux administrators to help us with what to look for. What daemons do we care about? You know, if an issue happens with the system, how do I fix it? And I have to say, one of the guys that came with us he's a true Unix Linux guy. This is his world right here. That's his world. Okay? So I have to say, the first time he saw Vista, funniest thing I've ever seen. Because he couldn't do a single thing on Vista. Couldn't right-click, didn't know where the menu was, because he's never used it. He's always done this. Okay? Or the GUI interface for SLES, Red Hat. What he actually ended up doing is he took his computer and he found out about PowerShell, and he loves PowerShell. So he changed his logon, so as soon as he logged on, PowerShell came up full screen, and that's all he had to worry about, is PowerShell. It was wonderful. Okay? So a lot of that knowledge comes from people working in the industry that do this day in, day out. We also look at things like configuration. There's my heartbeat. I can make sure I resolve the host name properly. Certificate is healthy. My run as accounts are there. Performance. So there's free space on my disk. And I can set the thresholds, as well as memory information, for example. Yes?
How do you keep those data in the database?
Okay. How long do we keep the data in the database? Great question. So it really depends on the management pack. The default is, and it depends on Ops Manager, because you can configure that. So normally there's 2 types of data that we collect. There's the real-time data, right? Health that happens right now. Normally that's, I think, 5 to 7 days. And then there's the data warehouse data, right? The historical data. And I believe that's, by default, 6 months. And you can configure it. And it really dependent on database space and how many systems you're collecting.
The reason I ask is whether you do capacity planning as well.
Yep.
With all the data you have.
Yeah, for capacity planning and whatnot, we definitely maintain that the same way we would on Windows. Yeah. So if we actually look at that, look at some of the views that we have, you can see that I've got things like OS performance. Let me see if I can actually bring that up. I was having issues with this earlier. Yeah, so I can pick some of these views, some of these counters. See if it brings anything. So you can see I've got some information down here. Let me actually show you a better one. So if I look at processor performance, for example, you can see I've got different process views. So this comes from our data warehouse. So I collect this stuff over time, okay, and in real time. I can look at different health components, like logical disk health. So it'll actually show me all the logical disks that it's discovered. And if I have multiple ones and one of them goes offline, not only can I find that problem, but I can fix it. I can do that with daemons as well. So if I come in here and I look at, say, cron. So if I go service cron status, it's going to tell me it's running. What I'll do is I'll stop it. Now it's unused. So what will happen, normally it's about a 5-minute cycle. I believe here it's about 30 seconds. What will happen is this will detect that there's a problem with my environment and set that counter to red and that server to red. So I'll see this go to red within the next 5 minutes or so. So I'll come back to that in a second. So you can see that it's not that we're just looking at a system and saying it's up or it's down. We go deep into that system. And it's extensible by you guys and by partners. So if you look over here, you'll even see the Novell services. Right? Just built into our views, because they've just simply extended our views. If we look at Samba, for example, they can show you the service, users that exist on the system, the shares that are on the environment, as well as connections and sessions that exist. So real-time information of what's happening with those systems. Let's see if it's gone critical on me yet. Not yet. We'll give it a couple more minutes. Okay. Now, so this kind of gives you an idea of the kind of monitoring that we can do. So let's go a little bit further. How do we get this system to a stage where we can actually monitor it? To do that, we've extended the Operations Manager Discovery Wizard to allow us to discover Unix and Linux systems. So we can look for an IP address, we can look for a fully qualified domain name, and we're going to look for a range of IP addresses. One of the best pieces of advice I'll give you today is make sure that the name you resolve the Unix or Linux system as from the Operations Manager system matches what the Unix system or Linux system thinks it's called. Those have to match 100%. The reason they have to match 100% is we deal with WS management. WS management is a SOAP XML-based protocol. That means it uses SSL and certificates. When we create the certificate on a Linux box, if the common name, the fully qualified domain name, does not match what we think it should match, we will not accept that certificate. Okay. So I can come in here and I can go, let's see if I can remember the name. Dinner Now Linux, I think. I can give it credentials. And I can tell if it's a super user. If not, I can put in a regular user and then SU to root. You notice SSH is disabled by default down here. That's for security reasons. We want you to be aware that by clicking on Next and enabling that checkbox, you're allowing the Discovery Wizard to scan the network. And if a system responds with SSH, we're going to pass the credentials. So we just want to make sure that you're aware that you're not just randomly scanning the internet, because we'll pass credentials to those systems. And I'll go ahead and start the discovery. Now while I'm doing that, let me kind of show you what takes place. The Discovery Wizard is by far the most complex thing that we've built. It's not like Windows where we just have a single agent that we can install and it just works on all flavors of Windows. The way I install an agent on a Linux box and the way I install an agent on a Red Hat box, totally different. Solaris, AIX, completely different. So we need to do it very specific. And we were worried about actually going out there and not being able to, we were worried about taking the Discovery Wizard and putting too much knowledge into it. We didn't want it to know how to discover a Red Hat box. Because if we built that into the binary, that meant that when Red Hat 6 comes out, we'd have to ship a new binary to support it. So a goal was to be data-driven. And we are. So when I import the SLES management pack, that teaches the Discovery Wizard how to discover SLES. So the way that it does it is we've got the different scopes that we can use, IP address, DNS, IP range. We will do a WS management call to that system. That's the first thing we do. The reason we do that is if it's there and the certificate is valid, then we will just install it. We have all the information we need. If the certificate is not valid, we'll go and we'll check to see if it's signed. Or if it is there, but we'll see is it signed properly. If it's not signed, we'll sign the certificate and say we sign it. We will give you a dialog box, and it's actually up on my screen here, that shows you that we found one, but the certificate is not signed properly. And you have to actually come in and say, I want this one. Actually, what's it doing here? Oh, I'll come back and I'll fix that in a second. So it told me the CM, see that whole DNS problem I told you about? That's what I just ran into. Okay. So we'll give you the information that we've discovered a system, that the system is not actually functioning. Okay. The certificate is not valid. We'll sign the certificate. We'll go and rediscover the agent. If not, we'll fail. If it's signed, we'll insert it into the database, and we're done. Now, if the agent is not installed, we're going to see if it's a supported agent. The way we do that is we actually deploy a script to that system. We run the script. That tells us, returns information, tells us exactly what system it is. It's an AIX box running the Power Processor version 5.3. If you run that script on CentOS, it'll actually tell you it's CentOS. Okay. So it's fairly generic. With that, we say we found a system. We have enough information with the stuff that the script returned and the stuff that's written in the management pack. There's enough information to allow us to tell you it's supported. Would you like to install it? Right? So if it's supported or not supported, we fail. Not a supported agent. If it is, we will deploy the package. That RPM, that LLP, that PKG file. We will upgrade and install it. We actually deploy them on everything but RPM. They're compressed. So we'll deploy them, we'll uncompress them, install them. If there's a new version, you just rerun Discovery, we'll find that it's an upgrade and we'll upgrade it. If it fails, we'll fail. If it's successful, we'll sign and validate the installation, and we'll insert it into the database. Okay. Once we insert into the database, Discovery start firing off to discover logical disk and physical disk and network adapters, etc. Okay. Because of time, what I'll do is I'll come back to the Discovery Wizard, and I'll show you some of the other capabilities within the product. So, talked a little bit about how we only monitor 6 or 7 different daemons, right? So, what do we do? What do we do if there's a bit of an issue, right? Or there's daemons that I don't have monitored within the environment. We have a template to do that, and I'll show you that template. Now you can see that particular system has gone critical now. If I drill into it, look at the Health Explorer. Shows me the cron is not running anymore. Gives me some information like where it might write events, how I can restart that particular daemon. So it gives me some real knowledge for it. If I switch over here and take a look, here's a list of all the different daemons that we detected running on the system when we notice that this one wasn't running. It also runs a diagnostic for us, and the diagnostic simply checks to see if cron is running. I can see it's unused. And if you actually take a look at this here, it's the exact same message, because we're running the same command. We're just running service cron status. If I switch into that, I can now run a recovery. This recovery has credentials, knows the context, knows the command, knows what type of OS it is. And it's going to go there and it's going to run a command for me to recover this particular daemon. As I scroll down, you'll see that it started the daemon. If I switch over and start it back up, you can see it's now running. So I'm able to recover these systems. Same is true with logical disks. If my home drive, for example, goes offline, I'll get an error telling me your home logical disk is offline. If I have the credentials stored in Operations Manager and it's stored separately from the non-privileged credentials, I'll be able to remount that drive. Okay? So that's great for cron. What if it's something other than cron? Say I have SendMail, or I have a homegrown application that I want to monitor. If we look at the authoring space, here's another spot where we extended the UI. We have some templates that are built into 2007, R2. We'll look at processes. That's something new. Windows processes, something new in R2. Look at OLEDB sources. Look at Windows services or web applications. We've added two new ones, log file and service. If I look at service, I'll add a new one here. And it allows me to put in a name for this particular one. So I'll call it SendMail, for example. Now, I don't have SendMail installed in this system, so we'll pretend. So I'll go next. From here, I can choose a computer. It's going into that computer in real time, and it's pulling the daemons that are running on that computer right now. Give me a list of all the systems. So I don't have to try to figure out what the daemon is called. I can also apply to a group. What a lot of customers do is they'll do this on one computer, test it. Once it works, come back, edit it, and apply to the group. So let's say I'll come in here and let's assume that that's SendMail. I'll go on and create it. Excuse me. What it's actually doing in the background when it's saving it is it's actually building a management pack for me. The management pack knows how to discover this and how to monitor SendMail. We'll come back in about 5 minutes and look at the Health Explorer, and you'll see that it's discovered it. If that goes offline, we'll get a critical alert telling me that there's a problem. So that's great. That's monitors. Now, I also showed you that we do some log file stuff. We look at break-in attempts. We look at somebody failing to log in using SSH. Somebody using SU and failing. So that's some basic stuff. What if I want to extend it? For that, we added the log file template. In here, same type of idea. I can look for SendMail logs, for example. Again, I can use a server name or a group name. In this case, I don't have to choose a computer then a group because I'm not actually checking anything on that computer, so I don't need a real entity to talk to. And in here, I can give it a path. And I can give it an expression. And that will look for error within the message. Obviously, this is not something you want to do because this will pull a lot of events over. Right? So you can be fairly complex with it. And some of ours, the ones that are built into our management packs, we found are extremely complex. And we learned that regular expressions is wonderful because it can find a lot of things for us. But it's a pain in the ass, because if you don't get it just right, you're either going to get too much information or you're going to get nothing. So internally what we did is we built a tool. Our developers built a tool to help themselves so that they didn't have to create the rule in the management pack, seal the management pack, import it into Operations Manager, wait for the changes to take place, simulate the event, wait for the event to be picked up to see that it doesn't work, and do that repeatedly. So that tool, they just put in, here's the message I'm looking for, here's the regular expression, will it work? And it works so great that we put it in the product. So in here, you can just paste in the message. if you click on test, it'll tell you whether that regular expression will pick this rule up.
Is it also working in the cookdown?
Yes. It's so, the question was, does it still work in cookdown? Absolutely. Is anybody here not aware what cookdown is in Ops Manager? Okay, so real quick. What cookdown is, if you think about it, if I've got 100 Unix boxes, and they're all looking at daemons, right? That is 100 calls, one to each box, every 5 minutes, right? If I look at one Linux box, and let's say on that Linux box I'm monitoring 60 different daemons, that would be normally 60 calls to that one system. As you can imagine, that is really expensive. What cookdown does is, as long as the data source is the same and the interval that it runs at is identical, we'll do what's called cookdown. And what cookdown works is, it's part of Ops Manager, has nothing to do with cross-plat. What it does is it makes one call to that Linux box, or to that Windows box, or to that Oracle box. It gets the data back, knowing full well that there's 60 rules that are going to use that same data. They then take that output from that one call and try to match it to 60 different rules. So instead of doing 60 calls and processing it 60 times, one call and process it 60 times. Okay, so I just have that one message going across the network. As soon as I change the schedules and they run at different intervals, we break cookdown. So one thing that we do within all of our management packs is we ensure that we have cookdown. And when we look at ACS, ACS uses the same data sources. We still use cookdown. So you don't have to make multiple calls. Okay? So again, this will create the management pack for me, look for that particular log file. Okay, so it gives you an idea of kind of where we're at. Let me show you one other thing before I quickly jump into ACS. So we've built this application called Dinner Now. And Dinner Now actually sits across multiple environments. So if I take a look, I can see that for databases, I have a MySQL database. I have some perspective. Look at IIS. I'm looking at Apache. There's my Apache server. There's my Apache websites. I can also add IIS and SQL databases to this. IIS website and SQL databases. And we monitor that as what we call a service, or an end-to-end application, distributed application. So if we look at that, this is actually this website here. And this website allows me to go in and place orders. So I can come in here and I can go and request stores in my area that can deliver to me. If I get the right zip code. Okay? So I can actually go in and take a look at that. So there's an actual live data. I can actually go into it. Now what I'm going to do, if you take a look, the information in these drop-downs, that comes from a MySQL database on a Slez box. These pictures come from Apache on that same system. So let's break it. So if I come in here, and I'll switch into my system, over here on the right, I've got simulate database failure. What this is actually going to do is it's going to run a task that's going to shut down MySQL. Okay? So wait for it to run. Here you go. So it's done. I'll come back in here, and I'll load the website again. And you can see that I no longer have those drop-downs. The database is offline. And if we watch this diagram view for a few seconds here, you'll see it's already gone critical on me. So I can do this thing called problem path. What problem path will do is it'll hide all the healthy components and only show me the bad ones. And show me there's a problem on my database server. I can come in here, and this is the Bridgeways MySQL management pack. So this isn't anything special that we did for this. I can go ahead and, actually I'm going to run the restart. So I can go and restart this. I'll go run a task through the same channel that we use. They've just added, all they've done is added a provider that has this information. It's gone and it's restarted the services. If I refresh the view now, I'll see that it's back. So let me log into it again, and I'll show you something similar with Apache. The 90 minutes, and we'll go take a look at that. Okay. Now with Apache, I can just come in here. We'll see that go healthy in a second. I will simulate the web failure, and we'll see something similar happen. I refresh the diagram view. Should go, you can see the database is critical. This should go healthy in a few minutes here. And if I switch back into my website, and I refresh it again, you'll see that I no longer have those working because Apache's turned off. Again, I can recover it. Right? So you can see that everything that we do is fully extensible by you guys, by partners, and we go beyond just the operating system. So that gives you a pretty good idea of kind of the high level of what Ops Manager can do. There's a lot more in here. Obviously, I have about 15 minutes, so I can't go into everything. You'll actually see now that the view has changed a little bit. Now perspective, which is, think of perspective as synthetic transactions. So what this Apache, the InterNow Apache synthetic transaction is, it's actually simulating what the customer would experience if they went to that website and actually tried to load something from it. So we know that the customer experience is broken. We also know that the database is offline and Apache's offline. And again, I can restart Apache to fix the problem.
Do you need to have other Linux boxes to do that? The same OS? Or can you have different OSs to monitor from?
Can I... Can I use the same or different OSs to monitor? So you mean use one machine to monitor Apache on another machine?
Does it need to be the same OS?
For Apache or for Apache and MySQL? Like they don't have to be on the same box. These can be across the world. They could be totally separate.
In the Windows world, you can use watchers.
Oh yeah. Okay, I understand what you're asking then.
You can do it on a machine with an agent.
Yes.
You're talking about
You cannot use Linux boxes and Unix boxes as watcher nodes.
No.
You have to use the management servers to do that. So the management servers are the watcher nodes. Yeah. So the way it works for perspective and whatnot is we have what are called watcher nodes. They're the ones that actually ping or simulate the experience. They have to be Windows management servers. They cannot use the Linux agent for that. So let's talk a little bit about cross-platform ACS. So one of the things that we've done is we wanted to make sure that with ACS with cross-platform ACS, you didn't have to do a whole bunch of new stuff. So to get it up and running, you simply run an installer. I've already got it installed, so I won't run it. But the installer itself, if I run it, if it's not installed, you'll see the EULA and then next. It takes about 30 seconds to actually install the bits. All it's really doing is it's modifying a group policy, a registry setting, and it's installing a module. And that's it. Then what you do is you import the management packs. The management packs, if I look at those, you can see here's my ACS management packs. So I've got a Unix one, which is kind of a global library. Then I have each of the flavors of the operating systems, one for each OS. You also notice that I have the new Unix library, and I have new Red Hat and SLES MPs. That's because we've actually had to modify them slightly to support ACS. So you have to update the R2 MPs to support ACS. And there's references. So if I try to import Red Hat 5 ACS MP and I don't have the updated ones, they'll tell me you need to update them. Once I do that, it just does a couple of things. It discovers a new property to the systems called time zone, because we want to make sure that the system that we're discovering from, collecting events from, might be in a different time zone. So when we insert the events into the system event log, we want to make sure we put it with the right timestamp, right? Because it might be across the world. So we pull that over, And the other thing that we do is we create something called an ACS endpoint. If I actually take a look at this system, you'll see that the endpoint has been discovered. If I look at a diagram view. I can drag that down. You can see I have this thing called an ACS endpoint. What the ACS endpoint is it allows me to control which of my Unix or Linux systems are actually monitoring for ACS. Out of the box, in the same way that it is on Windows, ACS for cross-plat is disabled. So if you install ACS and wait for it to collect events, it won't collect anything. We don't want to just randomly collect events from systems. So we let you control that. What you do is you simply go into the authoring space, look at object discoveries, and there's this ACS endpoint. You'd override it for either all Unix computers, a group, or a specific computer. That will enable discovery for just that type of computer, Unix computer or group. Once that happens, all of our rules target that ACS endpoint, which means that they will never run until we've discovered the ACS endpoint, and it will only run on computers that have the ACS endpoint. So that means if I've only chosen one SLES box to collect events from, only that SLES box will have the rules run on it. Let me see if we can simulate some of these. So I can come in here and I can try to SU to root. And I'll add a user. So if I look at the log file, in this case it's the syslog, and I'll just look at what we put in there. So if we go you can see that I've lost the SU one, but you can see it's up above. There's the new account added. The account was Barry. There's the GUID for it. You can see it was added by 0, which is root. And also added to group, to a couple of different groups, and it ran that command. Yes?
How do you determine what you want to get and what not?
So that's within the actual rule. So the rule has a regular expression filter. So we apply regular expression filters for these rules that will pull that information back for us. Now, one thing that we need is we need reports. So if I look at the reports that exist within ACS, you'll see right here I've got the Windows audit reports. It's right here. But I don't have any cross-plat reports, so I can add those. Let me open up a different command here. So here, if I do a directory, I've got this little command that I have to execute called upload cross-platform audit reports. And I tell it the name of the server where I want it to install it on. So it's localhost, where the reports are stored. And if you've installed the ACS for Windows, it's identical. It's the same, exactly the same way of doing it. Localhost report server. And then I need to give it the name or the folder where these are installed. So I'll just copy this folder here. And I'll run that script. And what this will do is it will just import all those reports in for me. If I refresh the view here, you'll see now I've got this new folder. And in a little bit here, the reports are starting to come up. Right? So we just import those reports. If I look at the event viewer, you can see it's collecting events. So if you look at the timestamp, 9:01, it's 9:05. Sorry, it's Seattle time. So you can see it changed the time zone. It actually picked that file. This is the which one is that one? That would be the SU. Right, so it picks that information up. It stores it into the security event log. You'll see it's got a source of cross-platform. So I've filtered out based on that. And what will happen is ACS will pick all of that, write it into the log file, or sorry, into the database, And I should be able to run some reports on it. Let's see if I can do one here. So, yes, yeah, on the collector. Let me see if the reports have had enough time to actually start up. So I can go from yesterday to today and see if it actually loads it. So it hasn't picked them up yet. Let's look at a different report, see if I can get some information to come up. Actually, let me go back from the 1st of November and see if it detects anything. There you go. So you can see, if we look at these reports, you can see that I can see the user root on Dinner Now Web, right, logged on from that system and used SSHD or SU. Right, so we're logging all of these events. You can also look at, go back to the, oops. I can look at account management, for example. I think there's one in here as well. We'll go from the 1st and view that report. You can see, added the user Barry. Okay. So I can actually drill and take a look at those reports and be able to actually collect that information over time. Yes?
So you putting root as user when you do discovering the...
Yes.
From my experience, the Unix admin is happy with someone else to access it. And usually the, for example, the SQL the SQL, MySQL or Oracle, they
Yeah.
have different user
Yeah.
to be able to do all your restart and stuff.
Yeah.
How do you handle the...
I'll show you that. That's a great question. So how do we handle the different types of credentials and the Unix admin is not wanting us to give us root access? So a couple of things. The information that I put in the discovery is used for discovery and discovery only. So we do not cache that anywhere. So if you have Unix administrators say, I'm not giving you my root password, they can enter in that information and they discover the systems, and that inserts into the Operations Manager database. We don't store those credentials. Once you close the discovery wizard, they're gone. Okay? For the rest of it, we have different, what are called run as accounts. So I can create run as accounts. You can see here's my MySQL account. Here's a non-privileged and a privileged account. If I switch over and look at profiles, I have a Unix action account. I have a Unix privileged account. And I should have a Bridgeways MySQL account. So these are profiles. Profiles are created by the management packs. And this is how a management pack picks up credentials from the Office Manager server to pass on to the agent. Okay? That's where I'm heading to next, where the low privilege and high privilege is. So low privilege is a regular user. So that user Barry that I just created, I can use Barry in there, give Barry a password, use him in there, and that will run about 90% of the workflows. So things like performance information, discovering the daemons and whether they're running, most of the events, alerts, all that information does not require privilege. Okay? Things like restarting the daemon that I shut down requires privilege. So I associate a non-privileged account with that Unix action account and a privileged account with the Unix privileged account. I also have to tell it, if I look at the account itself, if I drill into it, there's this distribution tab. I have to tell it which of my management servers have access to this. We don't want to just take these credentials and pass them to every health service. So we let you choose exactly which systems are allowed to get these credentials. Now, if I go to the action account and I put Barry in the action account, and this is not uncommon, but my Unix guys will not give me root access, and so I have nothing to put in a privileged account. I can just leave it blank. What it means is that 5-10% of workflows that require privilege, remounting a disk, just won't work. Okay? That's all it means. If I take the Barry user and I put Barry in here to try to circumvent the security, that won't work either. Because what we do is the agent on the Unix box, runs as root. The reason it runs as root is it impersonates the user that is requesting the action. And root can only impersonate root. So I can't have a non-privileged user then elevate to root. Not an easy way to do that. So what we do is when I go to mount that or to restart that daemon, what Operations Manager did for me is it took the privileged accounts that I have stored in here, passed it over to the agent and said, this account wants to execute this command. What our agent did is it spawned off a brand new process as that account and performed the action in that process. If the account that launches that process doesn't have credentials, it won't run. It'll just fail.
Can you tell them to type in the password so we don't get it, but the system?
Absolutely.
And then can you tell them that it's safe, that it won't get unencrypted off the line, for instance?
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So the question is, you know, yes, can we store it unreversible in the database? Yes, we store it in the same way that we restore or we store any other password in the database. It's encrypted using Microsoft, the built-in cryptology that exists into it. It's stored in a database, which is, you know, you won't see the database, the password in that. And then all communication between the Unix box and the Ops Manager box and the Unix box is encrypted. We do not allow unencrypted communications at all. If you change the agent to do unencrypted, we just won't work. Yes, in the back.
You don't have password access for root with using key, SSH keys. I already asked you for discovery process.
Yep.
You said it was supported in the native version.
Yep.
The same for
Same. Yes. So the question is, if we can't do SSH and we use keys, we don't have passwords, how do we handle that? So we talked earlier in my interact session about discovery. So we're adding that. It's our number one with, well, I guess it's debatable whether SU or sudo or keys is number one. They're both number one. They're both critical for us. So in the discovery wizard, you can't use keys today. The same is true here. We are adding that in the next version for both the discovery and for this. So you'll be able to run these tasks with keys as well. Yes. Well, no, it'll be the next version of Ops Manager. And the reason for that is it requires changes in Ops Manager to be able to support it properly. I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know when that release will be. Yeah. I don't get to make those decisions. So that gives you a pretty good idea of ACS and kind of Ops Manager as Crossplat as a whole. From a demo perspective, that's pretty much it. There's a couple of other things. If you want, here's where the providers are, cross-platform providers. We released an update that added the SLES 11 and Solaris zones as well as some bug fixes. That update is there if you actually search for, if you actually go to the Ops Manager page, or Microsoft.com/Ops Manager, you'll see a link to the update. If you go to Codeplex and look for XPlat, you'll find it. Crossplat, you'll find it. So I have some more questions and a couple things as well.